Today the most important updates come from the Toretsk direction. Here Russians have taken advantage of a botched Ukrainian brigade rotation and took control of a Ukrainian stronghold by sneaking through abandoned pipes. This direction has been relatively static since the start of the Russian invasion. Deeply layered Ukrainian fortifications here stemming from the war in the Donbas proved insurmountable for Russian forces, as they were not able to break through in the initial stages of the conflict. As such, this direction did not see any large Russian offensives and was categorized as a calmer portion of the front. Because of this, a Ukrainian commander decided to rotate the battle-worn Ukrainian 41st Mechanized Brigade from the Chasiv-Yar direction to here and send the fresher 24th Motorized Brigade to reinforce the fighting to the north. Lower-level Ukrainian commanders warned of the dangers of such a simultaneous rotation, stating it would undoubtedly lead to positional losses. Still, a certain Ukrainian commander, who was later replaced by Zelensky due to his failures, went ahead with the plan anyway. Either by good reconnaissance or leaked intel, Russians caught on to the Ukrainian rotation. Before the newly arrived Ukrainian soldiers were able to familiarize themselves with their new location and set up an organized defense, Russians unleashed a massive artillery barrage in preparation for their coming assault. Russians launched attacks from two vectors on the settlement of Pivnishne from the north and south to catch Ukrainians by surprise with a sudden pincer maneuver. In the northern axis of attack, Russians used an abandoned pipe that ran from Mayorsk to the water pump station, which Ukrainians had transformed into a stronghold. Russians used this pipe to move elite stormtroopers directly into the fortified position, surprising Ukrainian defenders and leading to the Russian capture of this position. For their next step, Russians needed to act quickly. They used their forces here to exert fire control over the tree line and railway running into the settlement, clearing the way for Russian assault groups to enter the first houses of Pivnishny. Ukrainians, still suffering from the surprise, were forced to pull back to prepared fortified positions inside the town, which they used to effectively hold the Russian advance. Russians realized that to capitalize on their recent gains, they had to secure their flanks to deter Ukrainians from counterattacking in their rear, as well as opening up more directions of attack on Pivnishny. Russians started launching numerous attacks on the dacha settlement of Shumi. Shumi is made up of well-spaced out houses that had been reduced to ruins due to the decade of fighting in the area, making it relatively hard to defend. Ukrainian defenders still put up stiff resistance here, delaying the Russian advance enough to allow other units to organize the defense in the town. On their southern axis of attack, Russian progress was severely falling behind, and despite having the element of surprise, Russian forces were not able to force a breakthrough. They were held up by Ukrainian defenses on the mine waste heaps, fortified positions in the houses, and the overall difficult terrain to advance in. After heavy fighting, Russians were able to take control of the Terikon, but continued to struggle in their advance through the suburbs in the south. Russians used their elevated position on the Terikon, however, to designate with lasers Ukrainian fortified positions they could not take with their infantry outright and bombed them with cab laser-guided munitions. With this tactic, Russians were able to slowly advance, as Ukrainians set up a defense in the high-rise district in Pivnishny. Besides the regular defensive advantages and fire control Ukrainians can exert over the surrounding area, the frontal buildings shield the buildings behind them from Russian laser designations, forcing Russians back to blindly bombing the area. Geolocated footage shows how Russians intensely bombed the area with artillery and FAB glide bombs. This footage also simultaneously disproves Russian claims of having entered the district, as glide bombs are too inaccurate and would have a high chance of landing on friendly soldiers. If you want to get access to the original uncensored combat footage, you can find it on our Telegram channel by using the link in the description. With the Russian front line now leveled out, Russians started launching full frontal assaults on the town of Pivnishne. Despite Russians entering some buildings, Ukrainians successfully defended against all of these Russian attacks. Ukrainians also shared footage of them destroying any buildings that Russians managed to enter, with anti-tank mines dropped from heavy Vampire octocopter drones. The Institute for the Study of War stated that after the initial surprise wore off, all Russian gains came slowly over nearly 3 weeks of intense fighting. Russians have also not performed any large mechanized assaults in this direction, using purely infantry, FPV drones, artillery, and airstrikes to accomplish their goals. Furthermore, Russians have not yet committed large reserves in this direction, severely limiting the time Russians can sustain their assault for. Overall, despite the initial surprise assault being well executed, the lack of overwhelming assaults and reserves committed by Russian forces means this Russian operation was largely opportunistic. After the initial shock wore off, Russians were not able to overrun Ukrainian defenses due to stiff Ukrainian resistance in the outer settlements, as Ukrainians were able to withdraw back to their fortifications in Pivnichny. Even Russian analysts were careful in their optimism, stating that it would be an exaggeration to call this a breakthrough, as Ukrainians are now lying in wait comfortably in their strongholds. If you're against the invasion of Ukraine and you want to support the work that I am doing, consider making a purchase in the online store, UA Supporter. Here you can find a lot of products with Ukrainian symbols to not only show your support for this channel, but also for Ukraine. The link to the online store is in the description. Thank you for watching this report, and I will see you in the next one.